Hi everybody, today we're going to have a look at traveling a network. Traveling a network can be described in many ways, and we have to know these ways in order to do the more complicated problems later in the exercises. So here's some of the language we need to know. Any graph that starts and ends at the same position contains a loop, and in this case, here's the loop here. If two or more edges connect the same two nodes or two vertices, then the edges are called multiple edges. So you can see here that this node here has multiple edges, as does this one here. Where each edge has a weighting, the graph is a weighted graph, and each edge is worth a particular weight, be it distance, cost, or time. So you can see in this case, the weight of this edge is 10, that edge is 15, and that edge is 5. If these were distances, and we were looking for the shortest distance, we'd prefer to travel on this edge than that one. Graphs themselves can be directed or undirected. So we looked at a few directed edges in the adjacency matrices. But this is a directed matrix. You can see that you can only travel some of these edges in one direction. When we have direction on our edges, it can also be known as a digraph. A simple graph is undirected, unweighted, with no loops or multiple edges. You can see why we did those particular definitions first. So this is a simple graph, as is this one. There's no direction on them, there's no loops, there's no multiple edges between a node, like this one here. This only has one connection from this node to this node. This path here has another node in between. These graphs are actually quite similar. See if you can see which connection's been changed. Okay, now once you've drawn your graph, we can move it from one node to another via an edge in different ways. So the first and most simplest case is just a walk. So if I was moving from A to B to C on my network, I would just write A, B, C, and in this case we call it an open walk because it doesn't finish where it starts, whereas the closed walk might be A to B to C to B to A. There's no need to go to every node. You just have to start and finish at the same node for it to be closed. That's not the only way that we can travel a network. If we travel a network with no repeated edges or vertices other than possibly the starting vertex, we call it a path. So if I go from A to B to C and then back to B and back to A, that's a path. Oh, that's not a path because we've traveled through the same vertex twice. We've traveled through B. So that's not a very good description, is it? We would need to change this to look a bit more like this. This one would have to go to here. Now, for this to be called a path, we would have to go from A to B to C and then back to A. Well, let's make it an open path for now. We'll make it A to B to C to D. In that case, we would have traveled this edge, and this edge, A, B, C, and D. We haven't traveled any node more than once. We haven't traveled any edge more than once, and it's an open path. Nothing's been repeated. Now, in this case, if we traveled from A to B to C to D and then back to A, we can make a closed path. And the path in this case is of length 4 because we've traveled 4 edges. In this case, it would have been of length 3. In this case, there's no way to make a closed path that includes A and D because we go A to B to C to D and then we get stuck. Because to get back to A, we would have to cross the DC edge more than once. Now, if we have a closed path, we also know that as a cycle. So A to B to C to D back to A is a cycle. If a walk has no repeated edges, but it can have repeated nodes, then it's called a trail. So in this case, we can travel A to B to C, and then back to B and back to A, or A to B to C and then back to B. We could go to node B twice, and we can call that a trail because we haven't repeated an edge, we've only repeated a node, and that's okay with a trail. This is an open trail because we didn't get back to A. Open trail because we didn't get back to A. In this case, we go A to B to C, and then back to B, and then back to A. That's a closed trail. It can't be a path because we've gone through B twice. But it's definitely a trail because we can get there without repeating. We don't have to go to D. There's no requirement in this case to go to D, so we can make a trail that's closed that just doesn't include D. Now, for our next set of definitions, we have to be a little bit careful. If two vertices are connected by traveling edges, they are connected vertices. So A is connected to B and B is connected to C. If they're connected by a single edge, they're also adjacent. Oh, sorry. A, B, and C are all connected vertices because A is connected to B by these two edges. Being connected doesn't require it to be next to it, it just needs to be connected by an edge. If they're next to each other, they're an adjacent edge. So A and B are adjacent, B and C are adjacent. A node that's not connected by an edge is called an isolated vertex. And over here, D is not connected to an edge. It's not adjacent to anything. It's isolated. It's on its own. So A and C, connected vertices. Well, B is also a connected vertice. Let me add it in. They're all connected. A and B and C and D and A and B. They're adjacent. Sorry, not C and D. That's garbage. B and C. B and C and A and B are adjacent vertices, and D is an isolated vertex. All right, so that's good so far. Degree of a vertex is the number of edges leading from the vertex, and this is a little bit different to our adjacency counting before, and where people can get a little bit confused. So the degree of A is 1 because there's only one edge leading from it, but the degree of B is 4 because there's actually 4 edges leading from it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Degree 4. For C, there's 1, 2, and 3. And for D, there's only 1, and for E, there's only 1. That's the degree of each of those nodes. Now we can declare a vertex odd or even. A, C, D, and E are all odd. 1, 3, 1, 1. B is an even node because it has 4 edges leading from it. Now, if you're trying to calculate the degree from an adjacency matrix, you have to be really careful with loops because you've got to remember to add 1 for each loop that's in there. Now, if we are in an undirected graph, so there's no directed vertices, and every vertex is connected to every other vertex, then the graph is connected. So in this first case, they are not connected because D is obviously disconnected. This is not a connected graph. This is a connected graph because every vertex is connected to every other vertex by multiple edges. And that's fine. Something to note, a graph that is not connected is disconnected or unconnected. This is disconnected, this is connected. Now, just to make things clear, edges can cross without forming a vertex. So if we look here, the diagonals cross, but there's no vertex in the middle. So there are in effect 4 vertices or 4 nodes and 6 edges. So we can't just assume that there's a node there. Now, connection is important for undirected graphs, but we describe it in a different way for directed graphs. So a graph is strongly directed if from every node you can move in and out of it. So you can see A, we can move in and out, B, we can move in and out, C, we can move in and out. That's a strongly connected graph. You need to have at least one inbound and one outbound from every node. Now, a directed graph is connected if there's at least one path connecting vertices even if a way is not possible back. So you can see here from A to B, we only have one way out, we have no way in. And from everything else, we have a way out. So as long as we can get out from each node, we say it's connected, even if a way back is not possible. Now, a weakly connected graph occurs if a path exists between all vertices, if the directed edges are replaced with undirected edges. So if you look at C here, there's no way out of it, so that it can't be connected. It definitely can't be strongly connected it's weakly connected. And the only way we could make it connected is by allowing this path to either be unidirectional in the opposite direction or bidirectional. And the last thing we need to know is what is a bridge? Well, a bridge is any edge that if you removed it would make a disconnected node. So if we removed BC, that would make C disconnected and it would no longer be a connected graph. Thus, we call this a bridge. So let's have a look at a diagram quickly. So what are the vertices in this? Well, we have A and B and C and D and E. There are vertices. And our edges are AB, AD, AE, DE, and CE. Now we should probably check that we're right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're missing one. If there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're missing. So we've got AB, we've got AD, we've got AE, but we haven't got. We've got DE, we've got CE, we haven't got CD. I'll put CD on the end. It's important to do that count because it's easy to miss them. So the adjacent vertices are AB, AE, AD, DE, CE, and CD. The exact same list as our edges in this case because we don't have any that are any others that are connected. So that gets us through a hell of a lot of definitions, and it's important that you know them all. So a simple way of learning them off is by putting them onto palm cards and then turning them over and using that to remember all the different ways, particularly walks, trails, and paths, because it does come up a lot and we use those for defining other things later on. So I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.